This is Twit.
HTC launched its HTC One M8 phone this morning. Like the original, the new HTC One has a beautiful aluminum body with a front-facing speakers. The 5-inch screen is a little bigger than the original, and the corners of the phone are rounder. It also has 2 cameras on the back. In other words, all the rumors were true. In other HTC news this morning, the company announced that its BlinkFeed home screen interface would become available to non-HTC Android phones on the Google Play Store, which is really cool. And we also learned from some of the documents that were posted on the Play Store that it looks like there's going to be a plain vanilla Google Play version of the HTC One M8. So we're looking forward to that as well. To talk about all this is somebody who knows the phone intimately, Dan Seifert, editor at The Verge. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
In your review today, you asked in the headline, is this the best Android phone yet? Well, is it?
From a hardware perspective, I really think, HTC came out swinging with the new one, and it is a really tremendous device. Last year's model was really good as well. It was a great design, great build quality, really fast performance and things, and they went back to the drawing board, improved a lot of aspects of the phone for this new model. But that's not really the whole story with HTC. I don't think HTC really has ever had a trouble with hardware. They've generally produced excellent phones for years, but they typically have trouble getting people to buy them.
Yeah, that's a helpful feature if you're the company selling them, is when people buy them. Now, one of the weirdest things and wackiest and unusual things about this phone is the camera setup. Now, two aspects of the cameras are weird. One is that there are 2 cameras on the back, and the other is that the front-facing camera, otherwise known as the selfie camera, is higher resolution. It's 5 megapixels as opposed to the 4 megapixel camera on the back. Now, first of all, why are there 2 cameras on the back?
So if there's 2 camera sensors on the back, but for a person using the phone, it really only behaves like 1 camera. It's the same way as if you were taking a photo with an iPhone or a Samsung phone or any other HTC phone. It's essentially 1 camera sensor, but next to it is another sensor that captures depth information. So the camera can tell how far things are away from it. So if something is 2 feet away and then 10 feet away and then 150 feet away, the camera captures that data and stores it with the file. From there, you can do things after the fact, like touch on a specific area of the scene in order to change the focus to a different point, or you can do things like remove the subject and do some kind of fun green screen type of effects with it, all right on your phone. It's very similar to, if you're familiar with the Litro camera, this type of ability to refocus after your shot.
That's pretty cool. I really like that. Now, in my view, of course, there's the mass market, which is really dominated by Apple and Samsung. But among the aficionados of really good smartphones, there are really 4 big flagship phones. One is whatever the latest and greatest Samsung phone is, Galaxy S5, for example, the latest and greatest iPhone, the latest and greatest Moto X, of which there's currently only one that they've come out with, but we're expecting a new one this summer. And then there's this one. From a pure design-y kind of point of view of hardware design, this phone probably does better than any other Android phone competing against the iPhone. From a sort of usability, warm and fuzzy usability perspective, they kind of have to compete against the Moto X, which is a beloved phone. From a raw power point of view, they have to compete against Samsung. Where do you think this new version fits into that mix? Is this going to really change the metric? Is this really like a killer phone that could, for example, get an iPhone user to convert or get a Moto X fan to convert over to the HTC One?
I think so. I think the design is definitely high-end enough to convert iPhone users. And then they've made the phone much more personable when you're holding it. It's much more comfortable to hold. Even though it is still a large phone, there's no getting around the fact that it's got a 5-inch screen and it's a big device. It's much bigger than a Moto X or an iPhone 5S, but it's still comfortable to hold in your hand, and that's important when you're using it every day. Whether they're going to be able to do that on the mass levels that HTC used to be a leader in the smartphone marketplace, and now they've fallen way behind the other companies. And whether this particular model is going to swing that tide for them is entirely another story that probably more comes down to their marketing message than the actual device itself.
Dan, also, I think one of the interesting things about the hardware industry right now is how quickly everyone's copying each other in terms of like, the quality of the camera and everything else. I mean, do you have a sense of how sustainable some of these hardware advantages are? Are we expecting to see them in the Galaxy S5 due out soon and sort of the rest of the market?
Well, as far as a design perspective, I think the design is pretty timeless. I think the fact that they're using a lot of metal in the construction, in the glass front and stuff, that really there's not a whole lot of cheap feeling plastic. Actually, there's no cheap feeling plastic on it, to be frank. And last year you could see last year's one was praised for its design, and it still looks really good today. As far as the specific hardware features, there's long been talk about the spec race and how it doesn't really matter anymore. Consumers don't really want a phone that has the fastest processor. They want a phone that just works really well and produces great photos and lets them browse the internet really quickly on the go and things like that. And so the HTC One hits most of those bars. The camera, unfortunately, in our test, didn't quite hit the same level of quality that we see from an iPhone 5S or even from a Galaxy S4 and very likely soon from the Galaxy S5. So the camera can be actually, despite its cool new kind of gimmicky features, the actual quality of the image isn't as impressive as some of these other models on the market already.
And my understanding is that a big feature that they were touting today is low light performance, which the iPhone does pretty well with, and also has really good color fidelity. So I think iPhone is one of the cameras to beat in terms of camera quality. Now, this phone also has a 40% battery life improvement, and this is a claim by the company. We haven't tested it. Maybe you have. Have you tested the battery? I know you had a previous model.
Yeah, so we did our full review of the new one. We've had it for over a week now, and we did our full battery assortments and tests and things like that. And we found that this model lasted, quite well, easily lasting up to 30 hours, which is really into 2 days of good use. So I think that the battery claims are so far from what we've seen, the phone lives up to the battery claims. That was one of the things last year that was a little bit of a disappointment with the one.
And just very quickly, all the rumors were true, as I said earlier, but were there any facts that surprised you that weren't rumored?
Well, it's kind of interesting to see that HTC is taking a similar route of Motorola as releasing its actual core apps into the Play Store. I know that was kind of just kind of hit the rumor mill this morning just before the actual announcement, but they pretty much kept that under wraps as far as they could. And so now customers who buy an HTC One will have their camera app or their gallery app updated right through the Play Store instead of having to wait for their carrier to push it out, which is a great thing. The other thing that was kind of sort of rumored but never really pinned down was the fact that HTC announced this phone this morning, and you can walk into a Verizon customer, actually right about now, you can walk into a Verizon store and purchase the phone. Which is pretty incredible. Nobody's actually replicated that before as far as announcing a phone and then bringing it to market immediately. And so that's something that you have to give kudos to HTC on.
Yeah, that is very cool. Well, I want to thank you for coming on today and giving us this late information. I know you were involved in the event today, and so I really thank you for making the time.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You can find Dan at theverge.com and also on Twitter at DC Seifert. Let me spell that, DCSEIFERT.